Hello and welcome to the Greensville County Public Schools webinar on entrance procedures for English language learners. This webinar will discuss the enrollment process, transcript evaluation, and SLIFE. So let's get started with entrance procedures for students enrolling in Greensville County Public Schools. When a student enrolls in Greensville County Public Schools, a home language survey must be completed. This survey is currently provided in English and Spanish. Let's take a look at the home language survey. The home language survey, as you can see on the screen, requests that students provide name, birthday, age, and country of origin. The first question says, what is the primary language used in the home, regardless of the language spoken by the student? What is the language most often spoken by the student? And what is the language that the student first acquired? All three of those questions must be answered. Then, in what language would you prefer written communication from the school division? The parent will indicate their choice. And in what language would you prefer oral communication from the school division? The parent will indicate their choice. That is the home language survey. That survey is a part of the registration packet that is distributed by the school counseling secretary at secondary or the registrar at elementary. The home language survey must be completed at the time of registration. And we want to ensure that the home language survey is reviewed for accuracy. Once the home language survey is completed, if a parent determines that they need additional translation services in order to complete the rest of the registration process, Language Line is available. If additional translation services are needed above Language Line, then the registrar will need to schedule a registration meeting with the parent, and then the registrar will notify the building principal, who will arrange for additional translation support. Once the home language survey is completed, if the survey indicates a language other than English anywhere on the form, then that form is to be provided to the EL staff. A copy is made and provided to the EL staff. So once again, those three questions that we reviewed on the home language survey, if any of those questions indicate a language other than English, then a copy of that survey is provided to the EL staff. The EL teacher will check the student's cumulative folder to find any records regarding the student's English language proficiency. They'll also look for things such as Access for L's assessments and language plans. The EL teacher will informally screen the student by meeting and speaking with them, and then the EL teacher will contact the parent to determine if that student has participated in a EL program in their previous school. But again, the most important thing is that if anywhere on that home language form the parent has indicated a language other than English, we must get our EL staff involved. So what is the flow for our home language survey? Again, the home language survey is completed by any student enrolling with us for the first time or an out-of-state enrollment. Was a language other than English indicated on the home language survey? If it is no, then we proceed with our regular enrollment and registration process. If it is yes, as I've indicated, you will contact the ESL teacher designated for your school, and then the ESL teacher will obtain access or screener scores from a previous division. If they're transferring from out of state, the access screener may not be available, so the teacher may need to administer the screener to determine eligibility for that student. Once a determination is made by the EL staff to administer the screener, this must take place within 30 days if the child entered the division at the beginning of the school year, or within 14 days if the student started after September 30th. New students to the division who have been previously enrolled in another Virginia school division may have access data already in a WIDA screener, may not be necessary. The EL staff again will review the student's cumulative folder to determine past experiences with EL services and their academic record. Once a student is identified, they will be entered into Power School by our school counseling secretary at the secondary or the register at the elementary school. If it is determined that a student is SLIFE, SLIFE status will be flagged by the division data specialist. And the state does give us a definition of who should be entering SLIFE status for the school division, which is indicated on this slide. This is our EL staff contact information and assignments for the school division. So when you do have a student who is enrolling, these are the contact people for the division so that you know who you need to reach out to if a student's home language survey indicates a language other than English. So next we will move on to foreign transcripts. And transcripts are typically reviewed when a student is entering at the high school level because we need to determine courses that have been taken, grades that have been received in order to assign credits for students in preparation for graduation. Obtaining and translating transcripts is necessary in order, again, to determine credits that students should receive in preparation for graduation. So first, we must request the transcript from the student's home country if one has not been provided. And please, patience is needed because as we know that this can be a lengthy process as students don't always have records from their previous school with them, or they may not have been in school recently, so they have limited and or interrupted education, or we may have some challenges trying to authenticate the records that we've received. Interpreting prior schooling experiences. So when we do have those international transcripts, we must be mindful that just because a student took biology, that the content, the hours of instruction, the grading practices can vary from what is included in our courses here in the United States or in our courses here in Virginia. So we must be mindful that just because it has the same name does not mean that it is the identical course. So when we are checking records, we need to make sure that there are no alterations to the record. We are checking for school year and dates listed. We are looking to see if there are any gaps in education. We are checking, of course, to see if the student's name is correct on the transcript, how many classes this student has taken. Hopefully there's a grading scale included, and if there are any comments that have been made by the previous school, the teacher and or the administrator. So interpreting prior schooling experiences would require us to have some information about the corresponding country's education system. And this next slide provides us with some of that information. This is general types of transcripts. There are only a few countries listed here, but it does tell us the number of years that are required in education to receive we call it a high school diploma, but to graduate, and the age that typically happens. In addition to that information, we also have provided on this slide the guide for evaluating foreign transcripts. And this guide is just a reference tool when evaluating foreign transcripts for students newly enrolling from other countries. We want to be careful because just like in the United States, each country may have its own grading policies within each place within that country. So as in the United States, different states have different grading policies. It can be the same thing within each country. This information just gives a general picture of the most commonly used systems in other countries to include the grading scales, recommended courses, and the equivalent credit within the U.S. So let's take a look at the Guide for Evaluating Transcripts really quickly. So you can see that this is the country index. So all of these countries are included in this guide, and each country has a form, a document like this that we are looking at, and it gives a wealth of information around when the school year starts, the equivalent of that country to the U.S. equivalent. It also gives a grading scale. Some of them also provide contact information if you have additional questions. And again, this is provided for every country that is listed here on this country index. So our document was adapted from the Evaluating Foreign Transcripts Guide from Rhode Island, and their document, the original document, was adapted from the New York City Department of Education, and both of these documents are included on this slide for your reference. The next section of our webinar deals with students with limited and/or interrupted formal education, known as SLIFE. The Virginia Department of Education has provided us with the SLIFE guidebook, which we will review briefly. But before we do that, what is the purpose of this document? Why did Virginia decide that Virginia educators and stakeholders needed it? Well, first of all, they wanted to provide us with a definition for SLIFE students, students with limited and/or interrupted formal education, SLIFE, as well as practices that will help us to support the unique needs of our SLIFE students, to include social, emotional, language, and academic needs. So the Virginia SLIFE Senate Bill 933 that was passed in 2020 said that VDOE needed to develop and adopt a common statewide definition for the term SLIFE. And that is exactly what Virginia did. So, SLIFE, as defined by the Virginia Board of Education, is an English learner who enters or re-enters any school in the United States at or after the age of 8 and is identified at English language proficiency level 1 or 2 and has at least 2 years less schooling than similar age peers. This is the definition for a SLIFE student. So now let's just take a quick peek at the SLIFE handbook. Let's go back up to the beginning. So the table of contents outlines very clearly for us where we go to find whatever it is that we are looking for. So let's say we want to know about the social emotional wellness consideration for our English language learners. We are going to skip down to page 15. And here on page 15, the state outlines for us key factors, top tips for educators supporting English language learners, essential questions for educators, and important self-care, and then a wealth of resources related to the social emotional wellness of our EL students. Now on this page, VDOE provides us with the ABCs of supporting SLIFE, and these ABCs include a tremendous amount of information and resources to support SLIFE students across all academic areas, to support them with their mental and emotional state, It even here provides us information on project-based learning. So this video we guide is a wealth of information for us as we work with our SLIFE students. All right, well, I want to thank you for listening to this webinar. I thank you for your participation. At the bottom of this last slide, there is the participation questionnaire that we would ask you to complete, indicating that you have participated in the webinar. That is your documentation and evidence to us of attendance and participation. Again, thank you so much for viewing this webinar, and have a great day.